Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gisela Kwok. I am the Director of Provincial Disability Supports Initiatives Branch with Human Services. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Employment First webcast, part of a monthly series of webcasts on employment for persons with disabilities. Today, we will hear from 3 members on the Premier's Council on the Status of Persons with Disabilities. The mission of this Premier's Council is to advise and report to the Government of Alberta on matters related to full inclusion of persons with disabilities in the province. The Council does this by listening to the opinions of the disability community. They then communicate these ideas and concerns to the government. Their work connects them to a broad group of community members and organizations as they work towards solutions. In this webcast, Council members discuss the Council's expanded mandate and the recent impact on Alberta's legislation, including employment. They will also take time to answer your questions. As you watch the presentation by yourself or with family, friends, or colleagues, please share your thoughts and questions via the live chat window. Also know that today's session is being recorded and the video will be posted on the Alberta Employment First website. Allow me to introduce the Council members to you. The Honourable Naresh Bhardwaj is the Associate Minister of Persons with Disabilities. He's also the Council's Deputy Chair. Associate Minister Bhardwaj moved to Alberta with his family in 1976. He became a journeyman mechanic, then returned to the University of Alberta for his teaching degree. He spent the next 18 years working as a teacher before being elected to the legislature in 2008. Cam Tate was a reporter and columnist for the Edmonton Journal for 33 years. He wrote extensively about persons with disabilities. Cam is currently a columnist with the Edmonton Sun and is a special project advisor for Challenge Insurance. Cam has cerebral palsy. He has spoken to countless groups on disability, volunteerism, and competed nationally in 1995 for Canada's Funniest New Comic. Carmen Whiten is the Vice President of Stakeholder Relations with Careers the Next Generation. Carmen served as the CEO of Special Olympics in Alberta. She has held several leadership and advisory roles with government and community organizations. Carmen has a passion for building communities around social issues. Carmen has multiple sclerosis and brings perspectives of having a progressive disabilities to the Council. Today's discussion will be moderated by Sharon Matthias. She has extensive experience in developing and consulting on public policy around health and human services. I will now hand it off to Sharon. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the session today.
Thanks for the introductions, Gisela. I'm pleased to moderate our session today and welcome Cam, Carmen, and Minister Bhardwaj. While you're listening, I'd love to have you submit your questions as they come to you, and please post them in the live chat window, and we will work with them when we get to the Q&A session, and Tina will be being the online moderator today, and she'll work with you on the online portion. To keep the conversation on topic, I know that there's a whole wide range of things that you'd love to ask the Minister today, but if you could keep your questions for today focused on the work of the Council, that will be really helpful in helping us keep to the topic. So 25 years ago today, well, I guess it wasn't actually quite today, was it? It would be too snowy for that. But 25 years ago, Rick Hansen's Man in Motion tour inspired the creation of the Premier's Council for the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Cam, I know you were there and covering it as a journalist. Can you give us a bit of a few insights about what that was like and how that then led to the development of the Council?
Absolutely. They were 18, 19-hour days, but they didn't feel like it. What Rick brought in the tour was one of the most amazing things I've ever been a part of. I covered the tour in Newfoundland,
Okay.
Ontario, of over Alberta and New Vancouver for a total of, I think it was 14 weeks. And I remember when we got here in February of 1986, Rick met then Premier John Getty at the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. They shook hands, and the first thing Mr. Getty said was, Rick, the government of Alberta will match every dollar Albertans contribute to your tour. And that was the real catalyst of making Alberta one of the most successful legs of the tour in Canada.
Really? Wow. Now, I heard a rumor that you were mistaken for Rick Hansen in Newfoundland.
I was. I was sitting on the roadside, and I was almost a mile in front of the motorcade. My art photographer, Jim Cochran, was filming, and I was sitting there waiting for Rick, and this boy of 10 years old came up to me and said, are you the man in the wheelchair? And I said, well, I am in a wheelchair and I'm a man, but I don't think I am the man in the wheelchair. And then he went in his jacket and he pulled out a little pup. He said, there's $5 here in coins.
Oh,
It's all I have. Will you give this to the man in the wheelchair? And I said, you know what? I have a better idea. That you and I wait for the man in the wheelchair, and we'll give it to him together. We'll buy. And I met Rick in 1979, so we had a friendship. And I said, come over here for a minute. He stopped, met the young boy, shook his hand, took the money, and said thank you. And I remember being struck of what wonderful interaction was happening between people with disability and especially young children.
wow. Thank you. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of work been done over 25 years by the council, but given today, we'll skip right to the end. And Associate Minister Bhardwaj, will you describe the renewed and enhanced mandate for the council?
Well, thank you very much. You know, CAMS gave a real, you know, a history lesson here on the establishing the Premier's Council. And of course, you know, the Act was enacted in 1988, but it hadn't really been, you know, renewed or amended since that time. So it needed to change to reflect an update to reflect more modern context of disability services. So essentially, what we have done is really expanded the mandate of the Premier's Council in few different areas, because you know there's so much have changed over the last several years. So we wanted the council to be able to do more of that work, and you know, and I'll talk about 2 or 3 of those changes what we've made, and one of them is really to advise the government regarding the alignment between the policies and strategies impacting persons with disabilities and principles of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So that was one of the things which we've added to what they were doing. So basically, the provision of advice, council will identify opportunities that support sustainability of services through innovation, which would, you know, so because they are really the ears and eyes out there. They're in touch with a lot of stakeholders. They're talking to many different people. People come and talk to you guys much more frequently than they would be to us. So another thing they're doing for us is basically, you know, providing the advice to the government. What are some of the innovations, you know, which are out there? And of course, the council also support with respect to relationship between our various stakeholders. As an example, even with you know, PDD alone, we have 173 service providers.
Oh, wow.
You know, which the council, they can come and talk to the council can talk to them, but there are also a number of many other stakeholders which council can get engaged with and provide strategic advice to the council. The bottom line to all of this is, how can we deliver services to Albertans? Make sure that we can improve the quality of their life. That's essentially, as a government, what we're committed to. As a council, they have a key role to play in that.
Super. Let's talk a little bit more about the UN Convention. Carmen, can you talk about the principles a bit more?
So the principles of the UN Convention are everything that I think we would expect of any citizen group or civilized nation, which we very much are. It's the things you want to see about dignity and respect and equality and accessibility. I think the real power behind the alignment of the Premier's Council mandate or the legislation and the UN Convention is that it steers our work and it allows us to focus on some very particular areas to actualize those philosophies that are embedded in the UN Convention. And by that I mean things like accessible and inclusive communities and environmental accessibility. And that doesn't necessarily mean the environment, it means the experience that a person with disabilities has when they go to the doctor or go shopping. And so that's the environmental environment. And the economic security, and I mean the Employment First initiative, is a huge part of building economic security. And awareness of diverse abilities, and I love that word, diverse abilities, because it isn't so much about disabilities when you think about the UN Convention and creating a very inclusive community. It's about recognizing the abilities and strengths of each individual, and then employment and creating a very disability aware workplaces and business communities. So I think when we get driven by those 5 things attached to the UN Convention and steer our advice to government based on those as drivers, it can become a very compelling message.
So I appreciate you touched on many of these things, Minister, but the particular significance of amending and enhancing the legislation at this time, what do you see as the significance of that?
You know, the Government of Canada really ratified in Canada but in 2010. So by including that as part of our legislation, really demonstrate that we're very much committed to the convention and keep working with the principles of the UN Convention and keeping that at the forefront. As Carmen talked about, you know, creating inclusive communities. Well, we're always very much, you know, looking at the numerous different ways that how we can improve the quality of life for all Albertans, and by working with the council and keeping the UN, you know, convention in mind, it enables us. It makes sure that it's always at the forefront.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a North Star.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cam and Carmen, any significance related to the community that you see?
I think for me, I think the community can trust that action will actually inspire change, motivate change in the way that government behaves, programs are reviewed, all of that kind of thing. And I really hope that that's what came out of the renewed legislation, because it continues to be talked about. And, you know, right from the start of the UN Convention being announced and Alberta's adoption of that, to the legislation for the Premier's Council, the Act being renewed, and the continued work of Council, I think we're gaining traction. And so I think the community can believe more about you know, instituting change than they might have been able to 10 years ago, because there was maybe a lot of chatter and not a lot of action, maybe more admiring the problems and not being able to figure out that way forward through them. So I think that's what this has done. It's given us license to advise government and hold their feet to the fire, and I think community's starting to believe that.
And is that your experience, Cam, that the community sees this renewal as a statement of commitment?
I think so. I also think there is a wonderful opportunity of public awareness. You know, the very fact that we're doing this today and talking about it, I think Council has a tremendous opportunity to inform, educate, and maybe enlighten, and maybe get people talking about people with disabilities as us rather than them.
I gotcha. Now, Carmen, I know you've been recently appointed as chair, but you were on the council for many years. How many years was that?
I've been on council for 5 years.
So
Chair for a year.
So you've seen the evolution of the discussion and the conversation. Can you tell us a bit about the council itself? How many members are there and how often you meet, that kind of stuff?
We meet face-to-face 2 or 3 times a year. We meet every month via teleconference, because council members are from around the whole province. There can be up to 14 members, plus an MLA or a deputy chair that is a member of government. We currently have 11, and I think in my time with council, the most exciting thing about being a part of it right now is that we have people that are young, we have people that are, I'm going to say like me, older, and seasoned, we have everything.
Diverse.
I'm seasoned, or anyhow, and everything in between. And I think the other thing that really happened in the last expansion of council and renewal of council is that we had a much broader perspective of the disability community. And it's not that any one of us represents a specific sector, but we bring with us a breadth of experience in that cross-disability lens. And I think that we are more We have more experience across more disabilities now than what we had in the past, and I think that that is the new era, the new generation for council, to have that really multifaceted cross-disability experience, and that variation in ages and the geographic representation, so that we truly can represent the interests of people with disabilities across Alberta. So it was a change, and it's a really positive change.
Good.
So it must give you a wonderfully rich kind of community to be a part of. Can you tell us more about your role as deputy chair?
You know, this is a really exciting council to be on, because, you know, you get to talk to really high-powered individuals from right across the province who have different perspectives on how to improve the quality of life for all Albertans. You know, even I look back 5 years, a lot have changed. How we offer supports, you know, significant advancements regarding the services and supports we provide to people with disabilities. So my role really essentially is the liaison between the council and our elected members of the government. So I take the messaging which is being discussed at the council and take it back to our colleagues. You know, just to be fair, in most recent years, the good work the council is doing, our colleagues in the government are much more aware of the role and responsibilities of the council and what they're doing, the work they're doing, the advice they're providing, either to the disability services or the human services, or, you know, on cross-ministry initiatives. They know who the members are because they belong to, you know, the MLA communities, as Carmen talked about. We have a diverse group of individuals from right across the province who are representatives of those local areas, and of course a lot of our local MLAs know who they are, and it really gives them a, you know, good feeling. And I, as a vice chair, and of course being in this role as an associate minister, it gives me the opportunity to be part of that wonderful creation, and of course as we're moving forward, be part of the solution, how we can create inclusive communities, how we can work with each other to make sure that we're looking after Albertans.
Super. Now you spoke about the role as being multifaceted of council, but could we take a look particularly at advising government, and maybe talk a bit, Carmen, about the work that you did, or the opportunity the council had to speak to the Employment Standards Act review?
I think the employment standards is a good example of something that came up a little bit more impromptu. And sometimes we get a lot of advance notice, and we can survey community, and we can go in with a message that is a united voice. And sometimes we find out the day before, and we have to go anyways. And so we have to rely on the experience of council and our own experience to be engaged in the conversation.
Sure.
And that is one of the last minute experiences. What happened with that is that they were really going through the regulations, and I think the employment standards, the regulation side of it, hadn't been reviewed for something like 20 years.
Oh.
And there really wasn't a conversation built around people with disabilities as a part of that review. But they were discussing what might seem innocuous in some areas, the matter of paid internships and work experience and that kind of thing. And so for people with disabilities and the agencies that are helping them re-enter the workforce or enter the workforce, access to that flexible environment on wages is a critically important component. But the people in the room, because they were primarily being represented by industry and industry associations, were of the mind that at the very least minimum wage had to be observed 100% under all of the time, no exceptions. And there was an exception written into the regulations, and they wanted that removed. Well, that would have actually put up barriers in the current systems that are used to create employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And it would have put the agencies that are supporting them at a disadvantage. And because we were there and a part of that conversation, when I was able to provide practical experiences of the impact of that and an unintended consequence, it's not that they wanted to work against people with disabilities, that would have been the outcome of that. But because I was there, it was like unanimously around all the tables. It was, I hadn't thought of that. And I really think that's where we are, is that if we're a part of the conversations and we can increase awareness, there is a huge appetite to behave differently. But it's that awareness and education piece, as Cam mentioned.
You know, sorry, I can add a bit, you know, bit more to that as well. You know, we're absolutely proud of her. You know, I think I've attended some of those conversations myself, where Carmen was. We're really proud of our employers in this province. We absolutely are. And this section, you know, which you're asking and talking about, it really hasn't been used in the province of Alberta for over 10 years, to my understanding, for probably more than 10 years. You know, and we have two advisory councils as part of our employment first strategy, which we struck. We have both public sector and a private sector advisory council. And while this review was going on, this question was posed to them as well. What are their thoughts? You know, almost unanimously, they said that, hey, if you're contributing to someone's bottom line, you should be paid equally, equal pay for equal work. And a lot of our employers, you know, haven't used this for over 10 years, for at least 10 years to my understanding. So, you know, we're really, really proud of our employers who are absolutely committed to making sure that we're providing services to persons with disability, which will in turn improve the quality of life. And council plays a real key role in that, especially, you know, Carmen talked about creating, you know, paid internships. You know, as a government of Alberta, we're absolutely proud that we have created 20 paid internships, you know, within human services. Very, very proud of that. And some of those interns we've hired, I personally had the opportunity to meet with some of them. Absolutely brilliant. And you just imagine the talent pool which is there. You know, for 20 positions, I bet you we had numerous applications, you know, so that shows us that people are able, people are willing, and as a government, we're absolutely committed that in the province of Alberta, if you want to work, you should have the opportunity to work. Yeah, so council does a good job in that.
I know one of the things that people ask me often is, how do you actually influence policy? So I appreciate that that's something that the council has developed some skill at. Maybe, Carmen, you could share a bit of ideas about how to make that work.
So there's lots of people that think because of the legislation and we're called a Premier's Council, it will mean that we automatically tap Minister Bhardwaj on the shoulder, or we talk to one of the other ministers or the Premier himself and recommend policy changes. But really where they happen is with the administration staff and with program providers, and we need to be a part of those conversations, because by the time it's actually on any kind of an agenda that influences policy, the decisions and the recommendations are too far along for us to influence them. So where we really try to be engaged and have solid, credible relationships is with the administration. And so, but as Minister Bhardwaj mentioned, that means across ministries. So we have people sitting on a barrier-free council that is dealing with maybe Service Alberta, or working with the transportation, or working with the City of Edmonton. So it can't be, we're in this disability unit. We have to have relationships across all levels of government and all different types of government, and that's the only way it will work, because we have to be a part of the early discussions. And so that's really how we influence change. And then I guess the practical side of it is that when there is something under review, we can submit a position paper, we can participate in consultations, we can conduct consultations. So there's lots of ways we formalize getting into providing advice, and some of it is extremely formal. And others is just being a part of the conversation and being on the pulse.
Super. And because you have such a, I'm going to say reputation, but recognition factor, Cam, I'm imagining as you gather input from the larger community that you have a variety of ways that you do that. Can you describe some of the ways you gather that?
I think that the first form of just meeting people and hearing their concerns and their ideas. We've also started a Facebook page
Oh.
and a Twitter account, and we are really trying to drive discussion on the platform.
So people don't have to go to a town hall meeting to give their input.
Not in 2015.
I'm pretty old
Twitter, yeah.
school, so I always forget. So how are the Twitter and Facebook pages, or the Facebook pages and the Twitter account are people starting to use those more?
We are growing. We have 330 likes on Facebook
Wow.
and 338 Twitter followers. I think we're growing every day.
Ah.
We encourage people to get involved and get engaged.
Aha. I'd like to shift the conversation a bit to, particularly you've mentioned employment first, and so to talk about that a bit specifically. So kind of take each of you in turn, but Carmen, maybe start with you and then talk to Cam about your experience with employment and what you'd like to see, and then to you for government input. Carmen.
So I was on council as soon as Employment First came up, and I can't think of a single thing that got me more excited, because I really think it is, employment is what will take us around the corner. And we were involved in some of the consultations in helping to provide insights into shaping the program. I think it has opened up conversations that weren't taking place before with employers and with industry associations and that kind of thing. I think that the emphasis on non-traditional employment opportunities, again, will take us out of that rut. We've done a really good job in, say, the last 20 years using a proven methodology. Now it's time to push that and introduce some innovation and look at things in new ways. And I love that Minister Bhardwaj mentioned the two councils, because one of the individuals that sits on the private sector council is with a very large firm in Edmonton. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say their name or not, so I won't. But his firm, as I said, is very, very large. And my sister happens to work there, and they have a blind and deaf individual who works for them as an architect. The fascinating part of this story is that person who sits on the private sector council didn't know he was employed. That company has so embraced employment of people with disabilities that you don't notice that they're there, they're expected to be there. And this individual has what in the past would have been seen as very complex disabilities, and probably in that range of unemployable or marginally employable. And now he's a senior employee in a very technical field with one of the most sought after companies in Edmonton. And I think that Employment First is accomplishing that.
Interesting.
So,
Cam, I know you've worked as a journalist for 25 years, or maybe more than that. I know about the 25, but so you've seen things change over the years about how employers embrace persons with disabilities. So what would you like to see first? What would you celebrate, and then what would you like to see happen next?
I think the overall attitude, when I joined the Edmonton Journal staff, the washroom in the newsroom wasn't accessible. And I was young back then, and I didn't want to make a lot of noise. But a month after I started on the website, there was a an accessible washroom in the newsroom, and the journal, to their credit, did it by themselves. So I think, once employees see the true fundamental value of an employee with a disability, they won't see any money they spend as an investment rather than a cost. When I began, I didn't have any help. I just was on a wing and a prayer. Looking back, some days I wonder how I did it. In the past 5 years, I've had help on the workforce. I'll give you a great example. I used to cover junior hockey at night in some of the coldest arenas in Alberta. I went and I asked if I could get an assistant to go with me to hockey games, which was a nice way of saying I really want a cup of hot chocolate after the first period, but having that support and that backbone really helped me buckle down more to do my job better.
Sure.
Rather than having to wonder how much was A, B, C, and D. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to increase the number of Albertans with disabilities in non-traditional ways. Everybody thinks working is 9 to 5. Well, now it's not 9 to 5. And that can be very advantageous. But the other piece I really believe that is crucial is having a support system in the workforce from people can be as successful and proud and produce.
Excellent. And I appreciate that employment is a key piece but it's part of a larger picture, isn't it, of a really inclusive society. And so, Minister, what do you see government's role or contribution being in terms of achieving the Council's vision of an inclusive and barrier-free Alberta?
You know, I'll quickly supplement about the Employment First, what both Cam and Carmen, talked about. Employment First strategy is about the individuals. It's about their needs, their goals, their aspirations, what we do in disability services. 13% of Albertans identify themselves with having a disability of some sort. So that means over 500,000 Albertans have a disability of some sort, of which we probably have a couple 100,000 Albertans who are ready, able, and willing to work. So in Employment First, we believe that if someone wants to work, they should have the opportunity to work. Why? Because it really improves the quality of their life. It gives them an opportunity to go out, make some new friends. You know, at the end of the day, when you ask them, why do you want to work? It's the paycheck. There's been a business case made, and it was aired on, various television channels. A very strong business case, because when you talk in the business communities, it is not a charity. When you're contributing to someone's bottom line, you have to be paid equal or better, number one. And when you're hiring people with disabilities, and this is one thing, our employers are understanding it, and us as a government are absolutely getting this message out as well, that they are the most loyal, hardworking, committed employees you will ever find. We're not talking disabilities, we're talking varying abilities, because we all have varying abilities. And this message, our employers are absolutely starting to grasp. They're really starting to talk about, what would it take? Naresh Bhardwaj may not be able to work full 8 hours, but how can we take this job and maybe we'll need 2 people to do the same job? And at the end of the day, the output would be even greater because we're all energized and driven for those 4 hours we're there. The production, the productivity is not down at all. They're starting to talk about job carving. And as a government, we're very much committed, in line with the Council's vision, about creating inclusive communities and inclusive workplaces. Well, let me tell you that this is not just government's responsibility. It's all of us as a society, as a community. Over last summer, I had the opportunity to visit a number of different communities right across the province. The opportunities and challenges are different. You go to Rocky Mountain, you go to Medicine Hat, you go to Fort McMurray, you go to Vegreville. They're all unique. Their opportunities are unique. Their challenges are unique. But I can certainly tell you that people living in those communities are very much aware of creating those inclusive communities, inclusive community environments, creating those workplaces where they're hiring people with varying abilities so they can be successful, they can be part of the community. Cam talked, his experience from 25 years ago, and I'm sure that he's, he can share with you from there to today what you see in a workplace. And Carmen gave a fantastic example of an individual who was on a private sector advisory council. This is what you're seeing out there. We had one employer came to us looking for 200 people. Said, find me 200. It's a it's a chain of restaurants looking for 200 people, because they have proven that once you get them, they're not going to go. Sometimes you have to say, hey guys, it's time to go home. But as a government, we have a role. As a community, everyone has a role to play in it, to create that inclusive community environment. And of course, council plays a significant role. And of course, at the end of the day, as a government, we're very much committed to fulfilling the needs of Albertans, making sure they have a good quality of life in an inclusive community, caring environment.
Super, thank you. Now, Carmen, I appreciate that there are probably times when people come to the council with what is going to need some advocacy, and you've not described that as part of your role. So how does that work, or what do you do when somebody comes to you with that sort of a need?
Regardless of why an individual or group might come to council, it could be to ask us to advocate on their behalf. It's a great place to start the conversation. And so they may be saying, can you take this to government? And there are ways that I can explain that isn't how we operate, that we get involved in consultations, we do position papers, we work across disabilities. There needs to be a policy issue attached to it, and multiple groups behind it. But they still have a story to tell that's very important for me to hear, because it is a part of it, and it will open up my eyes to looking for that similar theme or that similar story in other disability groups, because we don't deal with one experience or one issue. We want to deal with a trend in the disability community and then put that through a bit of a litmus test on whether or not there are barriers that people with disabilities are experiencing because of that. But it's only those stories that are going to shed light on some of the barriers that people with disabilities are facing. So although we don't do advocacy, it is a great start to the conversation.
And how do people get a hold of the council then to find a way to interact with you?
Social media. Go onto our social media feed, of course, Twitter or Facebook. But you can also go onto the Premier's Council website. If you Google Premier's Council on the status of persons with disabilities, everything you need to know is there. Every council member is on there. Our emails are there. There are lots of ways in. Our council members are attached to groups in their communities as well. And so if you meet a council member, and they'll usually have a name tag on or be handing out a card, that is an invitation to connect on anything. It doesn't have to be planned or big, or it is about creating relationships, and we're all highly geared towards that.
Super. We're about to shift to a question and answer period, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to have one last comment about where your dreams are to take this from here. And Cam, maybe I'll start with you and just work my way down to the minister.
I really agree with Hansen. Employment is going to be a big turning point in so many people's life. Not only economically, but socially and emotionally. I really would like to see more and more people with disabilities becoming taxpayers and not tax recipients.
That's a big dream.
I dream big.
Carmen.
I think I'm on the same vein as Cam. I think that it is that employment piece, but I think some unsuspecting partners have to come together more intuitively. It has to be a part of our instincts and our fiber, the fabric of our society, for industry and community and government to work together. And we need to move away from that essence that people with disabilities are the responsibility of government. It's an opportunity for community. It's an opportunity for business. And I think we're getting there, and if we get better at sharing the stories about the successful stories, the seamless stories about people with disabilities working in lots of sectors, then, like I said, it'll be the new norm. You won't even see people with disabilities working because they'll just be a part of the workplace, and you won't even notice them. And maybe that's a little ways down the road, but as long as we can keep that in sight, we'll get there.
Okay. I'll give you the last word for about 10 seconds.
Well, continuing in the same vein, I absolutely agree with both Cam and Carmen. You know, it is, I will continue working. We, as a government, will continue working with the Premier's Council to create that Alberta, more inclusive, nice, caring Alberta. which we can all be proud of, where we, every Albertan is Albertan, where they're treated as Albertan, and where you're not looked at a person with disability. We're all included as part of the workplace, as part of Alberta. That's where we want to be.
Thank you very much. Now, Tina's been following online, and so Tina, are there any questions that, and I'm sorry, thank you very much for this part of it.
Absolutely, thank you.
We actually have had an interesting discussion online, and so there are a few questions for the panel today. Steph asked the question, I think, Carmen, you might be able to answer. She says, one of the prevalent challenges is the lack of safeguards for people living with a disability, either in contracted services or the wider community. Will the council have a stronger impact in this area?
I'm not exactly sure what kind of safeguards they're referring to, but that is exactly the kind of conversation we would start and begin to channel through our connections to find out what that really means, because it's not specific enough for us to act on, but it also is significant enough in terms of its impact on people with disabilities that we would want to talk about that and see what they're referring to. If that individual were to contact a member of the Premier's Council, we would get more information, we would put it into the system, and we would start to talk about it. So I know that's not a good answer. I mean, for me personally, it's always about personal choice. And I had a child with disabilities, and that safety piece was huge. And in the first part of his life, I would not leave him at home with a caregiver because didn't have confidence in that. So I'm not sure if that's the story the individual is trying to tell, but those are exactly the kind of conversations we want to have.
Thank you. The next question is from Nikki, and Associate Minister, I think it'd be a good one for you. The question is, what's being done to educate businesses about employment for everyone, not just including people with disabilities?
Well, there's a number of different initiatives we're doing through both the public sector and the private sector. Whenever we have the opportunity to engage with either the Chamber of Commerce's, be at job fairs, may it be through Rotaries, we're trying to create those opportunities. I look back at the years when we started the RAP program, Registered Apprenticeship Program, which Carmen now is part of, where people were hesitant to hire 16-year-old children in industrial environments. That culture have come a long, long ways, and I think we are more or less there, creating that awareness as a government. But I think more and more employers are buying into that concept. They're aware of the concept. They're the ones who are promoting. Both Premier's councils are promoting that. So that's where it's really going, and because that's where it needs to be. Because once the private sector gets a hold of it, if they start promoting it, that's when it really gets out there. As a government, we have a role to play in it, but as as private citizens, also have a role to play in it. So whenever there's an opportunity, and even I give out invitations to anyone who wants to invite me to speak on their employment seminars and or to their businesses and talk about what Employment First is, I'd be delighted.
Thank you. Paul has a question, Associate Minister, I think would be good for you as well. He says, we've been talking about employment for our clients, but in the past 4 years, how successful have we been in large number of our populations getting gainful employment?
We've been fairly successful, because if we look back, even 3 or 4 years ago, and we look at it today, the question is often asked, not so much just the private sector. The first question the council posed to me was, what are you doing as a government? How many people do you have, with disabilities? So we're leading by example. We've created 20 internship positions. More awareness we can create. And the key to success in hiring people with disabilities, and I very strongly believe in that, finding the right matches, which means that you find the right skill set of individuals to the needs of the employers. How successful are we? We're fairly successful. Is there more work to be done? Yes, there's always more work to be done. There's always more awareness we can create, because at the end of the day, they are underrepresented, and we acknowledge that. And we are working very hard to make sure that we can improve on those numbers.
That's all I have for now so far.
Super. Well, I really appreciate you spending the time here. Are there questions? This is unexpected, so I'll talk while you think. Are there questions you'd like to ask, pose to people to think about themselves that are listening in today?
I really, sorry to jump ahead, guys.
No, go ahead.
I really want to hear more ideas around what the community is thinking about non-traditional employment opportunities. As Minister Bhardwaj mentioned, I work in the area of the Registered Apprenticeship Program, and a recent story is an individual who had an accident, a recreational accident, and he became an instrumentation technologist after his accident, and he has paraplegia. The demand for trades in Alberta is huge. So is there an opportunity we're not exploring yet that needs to be considered for those non-traditional employment opportunities for people with disabilities? So that's my experience. But I know that other people are in their communities and visiting workplaces, and they're going, wow, I never would have guessed. We need to talk more about those non-traditional employment opportunities so that other people are able to envision that opportunity within their own workplaces. So I would like feedback on that.
So if you have ideas or thoughts or experience that can contribute to that, please contact the council at their website or the Facebook or the Twitter account. That will be most helpful.
Absolutely.
Cam, any questions you'd like to ask people to think about?
Yeah, forgive the reporter in me, but I'd like to know the three biggest barriers Albertans think people with disabilities finding employment face in three ways that they might be able to answer.
Okay.
I think the key is we have to keep the discussion going on and on.
Right, right. So, the very last, the last question, I'm sorry, Minister,
That's okay.
gets to come from the web audience again.
Bobby's asking how many people with developmental or intellectual disabilities are currently sitting on the council?
We don't right now have anybody with a developmental disability on council. We do have some cognitive disabilities represented, and there's a fine line between defining both of those. We also have people with experience in post-traumatic stress disorder, and we do have people on council, myself included, who had a child with developmental disabilities, and that's a really good example of that cross-disability representation and experience that we have on council. We did previously have an individual on council, and it worked well, and would consider that in the future as well.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything you would ask the viewing audience in
You know,
terms of questions they could ask?
thank you. And one of the things I would like to ask, as well as Carmen said, how can we create more awareness about hiring people with disabilities? We're out, we're talking to chambers, we're talking to employers, we're talking to Rotaries, we're talking to businesses. If there are opportunities for us and other people have, you know, other ways, because I know when we talk trades, we knocked on one door at a time. This is exactly what we're doing today in Employment First Strategy. It's all of our you know, service providers right across the province. They're going door to door and talking to people and trying to match the right skill sets with the individuals to the employers, making sure that we're setting them up for success. So if people have ideas how to promote, if they are looking for information from us, please get a hold of us, and that would be greatly appreciated.
Super. Well, thank you very much again. And for those of you watching on the webcast, if there are questions that you think of afterwards that may come to you later, then please get in touch with the Premier's Council through their social media sites, their Facebook, their Twitter, or by going to the website itself. And thank you very much.
Okay, a big thank you to our panelists, Carmen, Cam, and Associate Minister Bhardwaj, for generously sharing your experience and insights with us. And to all of you who tune in to this session, we're grateful you spent the hour with us as well. We hope the information has been informative and inspiring. As we mentioned in the opening, the webcast is part of a regular monthly series we're hosting on the first Wednesday of each month. Next month, on February the 4th at 1:30 p.m., we'll be talking about self-employment and how to know is the right thing for you. To get updates and registration information about each of these sessions, please subscribe to our mailing list by emailing hs.employmentfirst@gob.ab.ca. As mentioned, today's webcast was recorded and the video will be posted online along with videos from all previous webcasts. So if you sign up for our mailing list, the video link will be sent out to you. We encourage you to share the video with anyone you think might be interested. If you have topic ideas you'd like us to pursue or feedback about today's webcast, please email us at hs.employmentfirst@gob.ab.ca and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. There's also an FASD webcast coming up on January the 21st regarding the Prevention Conversation Project. Be sure to tune in to that webcast as well. Have a wonderful afternoon and hope to see you next month. Thank you.